Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. Some wild stuff here at the end of the week. Did Putin actually just threaten nuclear war? And did Canada just admit they kind of fibbed about what was really happening with the recent breakdown of the free trade talks? We want to take a look at that. And how about the 85-year-old woman sprinter at the World Masters Games? Stay tuned for that one. Also, some wild stuff about picking up used needles. All right, let's just jump right into it. Canada is getting international attention right now from articles in magazines and news centers like the Jerusalem Post and the New York Post and others. And they're talking about the fact that Canada's CBC, the official, let's say, news arm of the Liberal government in Canada, has, as we talked about, really rattled people around the world now relative to the 9/11 celebrations that are coming up. Not celebrations, but remembrance for the devastating attack on the Twin Towers in New York that killed over 3,000 people. And what is causing the concern is the fact that CBC, the big wigs at CBC, have told all their journalists and everybody in the company not to refer to this as a terrorist attack. I don't know if it's supposed to be what organization that they think did the attack, or it certainly wasn't Peacemakers of the World doing it, but that has really rattled people, especially Americans, who are hurt and offended by this. It is the largest ever terrorist attack on American soil in American history, one of the most devastating we have ever seen around the world. And CBC saying, no, 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 don't call it terrorist. That would be too mean and nasty. So that's got a lot of people upset and a lot of people kind of focusing on that. Let's switch to another big focus, because in the US and in Canada, there's been increasing opposition to the building and the construction of these AI centers, these artificial intelligence data centers, which will hugely accelerate and increase the capability of AI. And as we've talked about before, it is, in my view and the view of many, kind of short-sighted to be opposing these centers being built. AI, there's no question about it, is with us, is going to stay with us. And the benefits that it brings in everything from the field of health to medicine to science to agriculture, you just name it. Obviously, there's going to be challenges and there's going to be things that have to be watched, but it's huge. China going ahead aggressively in building their AI centers to try and stay ahead of the US and Canada. And reports out just today, number of reports coming out, financial reports and labor industry reports out of the US, talking about the fact that this, in the US, where these data centers are going ahead, are creating thousands and thousands of jobs, many of those in the trades. And in the US, they are scrambling to find enough people and workers for these high-paying jobs. Very short-sighted for any country like Canada, for instance, to be just straight out people, rioting in the streets, almost, not quite yet, but wait for that to happen, but violently opposing the AI centers. As we said before, there are things to be concerned, things that have to be watched, and the AI centers have already developed their own closed loop water system, so they're not drawing daily from local aquifers or water sources. They're already looking at improved electrification and powering these. And of course, there has to be questions that will address local ratepayers not having to pay higher electricity rates. These are all being addressed, but still the opposition continues to rise, and the mainstream media also fanning the flames of that opposition, because of course mainstream media are culturally Marxist, and the thought of people, independent workers and independent contractors moving ahead, getting well paid, and these centers being developed goes against the sort of worldview of cultural Marxists. So we're continuing to watch on that, but huge positive job numbers coming out and investment numbers from the areas where these AI centers are going ahead. The Russian foreign minister spokesperson. Her name is Maria Zakharova, and she has just suggested, she's hinting that that Russia is not happy with the UK supplying and helping in any way, helping Ukraine. And she has said or indicated that the UK is one step away, I quote, one step away from disaster because of their involvement in terms of helping. So helping Ukraine. This is an increasing pattern, and now people are saying, did Putin himself just hint or suggest that nuclear weaponry might be used as part of the Russian attack system? So this has really raised the temperature. I have met President Putin personally. I've sat down with him. I have talked with him. This was a number of years ago. As I've said at the time to media and to my own staff, I can't recall meeting someone who had tangibly, almost tangibly, you could feel the ice in the veins, a very cold character. I don't think he talks just easily off the top of his head when he's talking about possible nuclear usage. So definitely keeping our eyes on that. And more reporting on that. Actually, Sarah Hooper at Metro UK did some extensive work on this increased threat to the UK. So we're going to be watching that carefully. Well, I've talked here, and you've heard also about Meta in the US, the court case relative to their platforms being addictive, especially to young people, and of course, Meta making an agreement now, almost $17 billion going to states and jurisdictions who want assistance to implement pretty significant safeguards being put on under 18-year-olds, and that includes 2-hour limits per day of watching on the various platforms. That could include, for instance, Instagram, and also nighttime shutoffs. Many people applauding this because the addictive factor of especially young people and young brains being focused for several hours a day on the devices has actually a deteriorating effect on intelligence and on intellectual capability. So that's been very interesting. Snapchat, TikTok, and YouTube also looking carefully at this. And people are saying, why not Canada? And why is Canada? Why are Canadian government officials being silent and not demanding of Meta that these changes come to Canada also? Good questions, and let's see what happens on that front. In the U.S. and Canada with the dramatic breakdown of the free trade talks that took place and the huge tariff talks that skidded to a halt at midnight on Friday night. And the Prime Minister saying there's no way that they're going to continue negotiating. It was the Canadian team that walked away from the table because the US were demanding things like French language concessions and no dealing with other countries. This surprised a lot of people. And now, as we drill down and as US officials are openly being interviewed on Canadian media, it seems like somebody's been doing a little fibbing here. The US saying we did not in any way even use the word French or French language, and the US is inviting anybody to go through the tapes and the recordings of the meetings, and nor did they demand that Canada not be able to work with other countries. And now Canadian officials are saying, well, now that the US has clarified their position, so it looks like there may be some getting back to the table. A number of us have encouraging this, saying, get back to that table, because on September the 8th, Canada is saying they're going to retaliate even harder. Everybody will lose from that. And looks like, I think we should just be at the point where instead of pointing the finger and say, for instance, we're Canadians fibbing about this, let's just get back to the table now that the clarifications are there, and that the US indeed is saying they never did demand this as a red line, being anything to do with the French question or Canada's ability to talk to other countries. Well, On the consumer front, companies responding and not even wanting to get into the fray, but just wanting, these are Canadian companies, for instance, Chapman's Ice Cream, one of my favorites, and they didn't pay me to say that. They are saying that they are going to be replacing, they do use a lot of American product in the making of their ice cream. Not sure why, but they do, and that's certainly their right to do that, and that is reported on their packaging. And now they're saying they're replacing 70% of all the American product that has been going into their ice cream. They are removing and putting in Canadian product, and they're also saying they're not going to raise prices for 2 years on their ice cream. So good news there, and it shows how businesses can adapt according to the feeling out there in the market. Hey, did you watch, or you've been seeing the World Masters track and field events that's been happening in Korea? The a woman who won the category there for Masters, she's 85 years old. She's a Canadian. Eileen Bergen is her name, in the 100-meter dash. And the amazing thing there, and it's a great video to watch, man, that woman could just blast down the track. And she only started seriously running 5 years ago when she's 80. So there you go, folks. Some of you who some people disrespectfully refer to as old, there is hope. Thanks, Eileen, for doing that and for showing that we can be blasting ahead on these type of things. That's actually great news there. The kind of interesting news coming out relative to what's happening with the price of oil. Of course, it has gone up because of the Iranian conflict, gone up, taking quite a bump on that. You'll be feeling that at the gas stations, of course. And the National Post is reporting that for Alberta, that means over one quarter, just over one quarter, that's going to bring in a $2 billion surplus, because the price of oil goes up. Alberta benefits, as does the rest of Canada, through the taxes paid by that. And I can guarantee you, you watch now, other people, other governments from around the country are going to start screaming at Alberta, saying, give us some of that money. We deserve that money. You shouldn't be making that extra money. That kind of cry and shriek from the rest of Canada, or from some parts of Canada, always ignores the fact that oil and gas prices are up and down, very volatile, and Alberta has been very negatively impacted for years and years when the price is down. So I'm saying to Alberta, watch out, they're coming at you. They will come at you from central Canada, from the federal government, and this is going to be happening right at the time where in October there is a referendum in Alberta that's going to be letting Albertans answer a number of questions, and one of those is related to, should Alberta be pursuing talks about pulling out of the country? So interesting timing there, but watch it. And as I've said before and said on this podcast and other places, when Alberta was going through its severe negative downtimes, what did Alberta do? It reduced taxes, it reduced spending. Even MLAs took a cut on their salary and canceled their pension plan. Other provinces haven't done the same. They keep borrowing and going more and more into debt. So we're saying very clearly, don't punish Alberta just because, first of all, we're in an up period on oil prices. Those prices will go down again, and Alberta takes cost cutting very seriously, unlike many other provinces. In election races that are coming up, and we're keeping an eye, especially on neighboring states and what's going on in the U.S. In Alaska, the incumbent who's running there for Senate, and he's a Republican, his name is Dan Sullivan. His middle initial is S. And you're saying, what's the big deal about that? Well, somebody has registered to run against him. Now, normally an independent name running for governor, would only garner a few votes and wouldn't be a concern when a Republican is going against a Democrat. But this guy was able to register with the exact same name, Dan S. Sullivan. So you can imagine the confusion on a ballot when people go to vote. They see two Dan S. Sullivans. That means a certain number, maybe even a significant number of the votes that would be going to the Dan S. Sullivan, who is the senator already and running for re-election, a number of his votes would be hived off just because voters would get tricked into voting for the other guy. And then when there was some further research went on, the second Dan S. Sullivan, it's found out his middle initial was not S, it's J. So he's had to change from an S to a J. But this is the type of antics that the Democrats are up to. They talk about wanting free and fair elections, and then they wind up scuttling things that's going to be a concern at the ballot box. Let's see what happens. In Seattle, and we follow some of these mayoralty races, not just in Vancouver and Seattle and Los Angeles and New York, because they are a sign of what's happening sort of in the culture wars going on. In Seattle, there's a woman by the name of Andrea Suarez, and she has taken upon herself, she calls herself called organization is called Heart Seattle. That's H-E-R-T, Heart Seattle. She's got a heart for Seattle. And one thing she doesn't charge for this, she and her volunteers do, they go through the parks where all the addicts hang out and shoot up with, in many cases, it's the free drugs and the free needles that are given to them by the state. And then, of course, they leave their needles lying in the grass and lying on the playground. And Andrea and her volunteers go and pick those up. And now she's getting attacked by the Department of Labor in Seattle. And they're saying, are you licensed to pick up needles? Are you improperly handling those needles? This is clearly just such a case of bureaucracies that go insane and need to be ruled in. And folks, as you come up to municipal elections this year, these are very important. Municipal elections usually only get about a 30% turnout. You need to turn up. You need to look at what the various candidates are saying. And if they are supporting crazy and insane policies, they need to be punted out. And candidates who are speaking up on common sense issues need to be the ones that get your vote. That goes in Canada or the US. The devastating earthquakes that we've been seeing and the following mudslides, etc., that are happening, especially in Nepal. There's articles today and yesterday in the Christian Post news outlet talking about, of course, Nepal has a significant minority Christian population, and the majority of people doing the rescue work are coming from Christian organizations. They're talking about Christians on their mountain bikes, furiously pedaling up these steep mountains and hills where the devastation has occurred to rescue obviously people who aren't Christians, Buddhists and others. And so hats off to the rescuers and the good work going on there. And our hearts go out to these areas that are getting so badly hit. Folks, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.